Welcome back to Atomic News, monitoring global chaos so you don't have to. The situation in the Middle East still looks largely unchanged, but unchanged here does not mean stable. The Strait of Hormuz remains blocked, global shipping is still under pressure, and despite Washington's calls for support, Europe is showing very little appetite for turning this into some kind of collective Western war effort. Germany has been especially blunt. Berlin made it clear that this is not NATO's war, and German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius openly questioned what a handful of European frigates were supposed to achieve in a waterway already dominated by the U.S. Navy. German officials also stressed that neither the United States nor Israel had consulted them before launching the operation, and that Washington initially made clear European military assistance was neither needed nor requested. At the same time, Brussels is still trying to think in diplomatic rather than cinematic terms, with EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas floating a possible Black Sea model to reopen shipping without dragging half the planet into a larger regional inferno. But on the ground, escalation continues to outrun diplomacy. Israel says it has launched a new wave of strikes on regime infrastructure in Tehran and claims to have eliminated two high-value regime figures, Ali Larijani and Basij chief Gholam Reza Soleimani. And these were not random bureaucrats. Larijani was one of the regime's most important power brokers, a former nuclear negotiator, former Speaker of Parliament, and one of the men helping hold Iran's system together after Khamenei's death. Soleimani, meanwhile, headed the Basij, one of the regime's most feared instruments of internal repression, with the blood of thousands of Iranians on its hands after years of crushing protests, hunting dissidents, and terrorizing its own people. And at last, the moment has come for these bastards to answer for their crimes before Allah, or Yahweh. And with Reuters reporting that Iran's new supreme leader has rejected de-escalation proposals outright, there is still no serious sign that this confrontation is moving toward any real off-ramp. And while the Gulf remains stuck in that frozen state between war and wider war, another front nearby is heating up fast. The fighting between Pakistan and Afghanistan has become the worst in years, and by this point it looks less like a border flare-up and more like an undeclared war with air power, retaliation cycles, and civilians trapped underneath the boot. Reuters reports that the latest escalation came after Afghan authorities accused Pakistan of striking the Omid Drug Rehabilitation Hospital in Kabul. Taliban officials claimed hundreds were killed and hundreds more wounded, while Pakistan rejected that account and said it had targeted militant infrastructure instead. Reuters could not independently verify the casualty numbers, which matters, because in wars like this, numbers often arrive already wearing propaganda as a uniform. Still, even without pretending, we know every body count with laboratory precision. The trajectory is obvious. This border is no longer simmering, it is burning. But let's be honest, for most people, wars and mass death only become real when they start pushing up the price of gasoline, avocados, and oat milk lattes.
When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation.
Further west, Cuba is sinking deeper into a crisis that looks less like a blackout and more like state decay, with the lights going out in stages. On March 16th, the country's national grid collapsed again, leaving around 10 million people without electricity. But this did not begin with one bad day on the power grid. The roots of the crisis are older and uglier. Cuba's energy system is worn out. Its thermoelectric infrastructure is badly aged. Fuel supplies have dried up, and regular oil shipments from Venezuela, historically the island's lifeline, have effectively stopped this year. Reuters reports that the latest collapse likely began with a transmission failure, but the broader reason the system keeps falling apart is simple: too little fuel, too little maintenance, and an electrical network held together with political slogans and old wire. This is already the third major blackout in 4 months, and it comes after months of worsening outages and rare violent protests. When a country starts losing the grid, the fuel, and the public's patience all at once, that is no longer just an infrastructure story. That is a regime stress test. The next story begins off the coast of Portugal during NATO's REPMUS and Dynamic Messenger 2025 exercises. For the first time in NATO history, the Ukrainian Navy led the planning, coordination, and command of the opposing force. NATO and Ukraine's defense ministry described it as a historic first. Later reporting on the exercise said the Ukrainian-led side won all 5 scenarios, and in one convoy attack episode scored enough simulated hits on a NATO frigate that, in a real war, the ship would likely have gone down. On paper, that sounds impressive. But for Ukraine, the results of those exercises were almost modest compared to what it has already done on a real battlefield. Because in the Black Sea, Ukraine did not simulate the collapse of Russian naval dominance. It caused it, and that is what makes the Black Sea story so extraordinary. Ukraine entered the full-scale invasion with almost no real navy to speak of. One frigate, Hetman Sahaydachny, stuck in repair and scuttled in the first days of the war, so it would not fall into Russian hands, plus a small collection of patrol and artillery boats, including former U.S. Coast Guard cutters delivered shortly before the invasion. That was not a fleet built to challenge a major naval power. It was a skeleton. But necessity has a way of forcing innovation faster than doctrine ever can. Ukraine built maritime drones, fused them with intelligence and strike planning, and turned the Black Sea from a Russian comfort zone into a hunting ground. The opening wound was the sinking of Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, in April 2022. Ukraine said it hit the cruiser with Neptune anti-ship missiles, while Moscow blamed fire and exploding ammunition. Either way, the flagship sank, and so did the aura of invulnerability around the fleet. From there, the campaign only widened. By November 2023, Ukraine said it had destroyed 15 Russian naval vessels in the Black Sea and damaged 12 more. By February 2024, Ukraine's military said the number had risen to 25 Russian military vessels and ships, plus 1 submarine. A month later, Ukraine's Navy said roughly 1/3 of the Black Sea Fleet's pre-war ship composition had been put out of action. Ukraine did not stop at hulls either. In September 2023, it struck the Black Sea Fleet headquarters in Sevastopol itself. Symbolically, that strike mattered even beyond the damage. Ukraine was no longer just hitting ships, it was hitting the command brain of the fleet. By 2025, Ukraine was no longer fighting only on the surface of the sea, but above it and below it too. In June, Kiev said it had hit the Crimean Bridge with 1,100 kilograms of underwater explosives placed below the waterline. In December, Ukraine said its new subsea baby underwater drones struck a submarine in Novorossiysk, in what it described as a historic first. The location of the strike footage in the port was verified, while Moscow denied any damage. Later open-source satellite reporting indicated that the submarine had still not moved from its berth more than a month after the attack, which strongly supports the Ukrainian claim that something there was badly wrong. And the really wild part is that Ukrainian sea drones are no longer just explosive speedboats. They have already evolved into multi-role combat platforms, able not only to ram ships, but to carry missiles and other weapons into a fight in ways that looked futuristic only a few years ago. And the financial side of this story is brutal too. Even a conservative public estimate for just a handful of the best-known losses already pushes the bill well above $1 billion. Moscow alone was estimated at about $750 million. Public estimates for the Rostov-on-Don submarine put it at roughly $300 million. Saratov was estimated at around $75 million. Add ships like Sergei Kotov and Ivanovets, and the lower bound tally lands around $1.25 to $1.3 billion. And that is still conservative. It does not include many other damaged or destroyed vessels without reliable public pricing. The repeated disruption of Novorossiysk, the headquarters strike in Sevastopol, the hit on the Crimean Bridge, or the aircraft and helicopters engaged by naval drones. In plain English, a country that began this war with one frigate in repair and a handful of small boats has imposed direct naval losses on Russia worth well over $1 billion, forced much of the Black Sea Fleet out of Sevastopol and toward Novorossiysk, and then reached there too. And that is the real conclusion here. Ukraine is not trying to embarrass its NATO partners. It is trying to warn them, teach them, and help them adapt faster than peacetime bureaucracies usually allow. The point of showing these results, whether off the coast of Portugal or in the real Black Sea, is to demonstrate just how vulnerable modern fleets have become in the age of cheap, precise, and rapidly evolving unmanned systems. This is not about gloating. It is about changing doctrine before war changes it for you. And it is also worth saying clearly that Ukraine is not doing all of this entirely alone. What makes these blows so dangerous is the symbiosis, Ukrainian ingenuity, Ukrainian willingness to experiment under fire, Western intelligence support, and Western long-range weapons. The wider campaign against the Black Sea Fleet has included not only sea drones, but also repeated strikes on Crimean military infrastructure with systems such as Storm Shadow and ATACMS. So in practice, parts of NATO are already deeply inside this war, even if not under their own flags over the battlefield. And that symbiosis is a very dangerous force. Ukraine wants to spread this experience across the alliance as quickly as possible because Russia is learning too. Sea drone warfare is no longer a futuristic concept. It is already here. Ukraine is not asking for applause. It is offering a survival manual. This is Professor Nuke, and this was Atomic News. Stay alert.
So stay tuned for all the wondrous views. You're watching Atomic News.